Revelation, as I've said before, is the principal book of prophecy in the New Testament of the Bible.
The Key of David with Gerald Flurry.
Greetings, everyone. The nation of Iran held U.S. embassy workers hostage for 444 days in 1979 to 1981. It was one of the most humiliating experiences ever in the history of America. Never were we more dishonored and disgraced before the entire world. And we've done little or nothing to actually remove that shame. The shame that has been lingering there for these many years and left a stark picture in the eyes of this world. Now Iran has sent a new ambassador to the United Nations, and he was actually involved. He was himself involved in that 1979 debacle. And he's becoming Iran's UN ambassador. Now, we ought to ask ourselves, why would they do such a thing? Why would Iran do that? Well, because they love humiliating the United States, they despise the United States, and they want to continue to show the world how weak America is, and of course, how strong they are. And we continue to let them get away with it. That's the way most people that know the situation view it, I believe, or at least have insights into that. I want to read to you from Reuters what was said about this new ambassador that Iran is sending to the UN. It is a disgrace to the United States government that accepts Abu Talebi's, that's the new ambassador's, visa as Iranian ambassador to the UN. Former hostage Barry Rosen said in a statement provided to Reuters by Alan Madison, spokesman for and member of the legal team representing the former hostages in their compensation claims. It may be a precedent, but if the President and the Congress don't condemn this act by the Islamic Republic, then our captivity and suffering for 444 days at the hands of Iran was for nothing. He said he can never set foot on American soil. But the one thing they do know is somehow this man was involved in that 440-day crisis. And the article goes on to say Tom Langford, the hostages' lead attorney, went further. At a time when the 52 American hostages and their families remain without reparations and relief, the idea that one of their self-styled kidnappers and torturers would be allowed to receive a visa, enter the United States, and then hold himself out at the rank of UN ambassador makes a mockery of the horrific acts he and Iran perpetrated. It is yet another slap in the face of the brave Americans who were mentally and physically abused for 444 days. The President, the Secretary of State, and the Congress should not permit this to happen, Langford added. Now, Iran wants to get more mileage out of this and just bring up this image over and over and over of how weak and humiliated the Americans were in 1979 through 1981. Now, I think both political parties in the U.S. have certainly demonstrated weakness in this area. And this is not a political message at all. But I want to show you something about your own history which you may not know is your history, but this is about our ancestors, and we've proven that through our book, The United States and Britain in Prophecy, which we give to people free and have sent out over 6 million copies to be read. Now, there was a teenager in the Bible, a teenager, who taught us if we will believe our own history and prophecy for this end time, that he taught us a message about how to handle a situation like this. And it is one that ought to resonate with us today because of the way we're conducting ourselves. The former prophets are prophecy for this end time, and I'm going to quote from Samuel, which is one of those former prophets, and he built his whole book around the throne of David. David was such a significant leader in ancient Israel, and I don't think probably you'll find any man who was written about more in the Bible than David. And that is for a very great reason. But he showed the kind of leadership that is needed in Israel. And that includes America and Britain and the Jewish nation in the Middle East and other nations of Israel. But the book of Samuel really shows us how to make a nation great, or how a nation is going to falter if they don't learn this lesson. So I'm going to quote from a long article we've written about this, that I have written, and I'll just quote some from that. Notice what it says. When King Saul ruled the nation, that is the nation of Israel, it suffered from a shameful lack of faith. David, still a teenager, visited the army at the battlefront and saw Israel's soldiers, who should have been the picture of faith-filled valor, cowering in fear before a Philistine warrior. Quote, verse 24 of 1 Samuel 17, "And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid." Now, those men were afraid of a man. You see the same pathetic spirit of timidity and fear, and even worse in modern Israel, both physical and spiritual. Saul offered a great reward to anyone who would stand up to Goliath. But no one would fight even for riches. They wouldn't fight this giant, a huge man. And there was not one man in Israel's army that would fight him. Now, this may sound like it's not reality to some people, and they may criticize this, but I tell you, you can prove every word of this in your Bible. And it did happen just exactly as the way I'm reading it to you, and I'll give you literature to prove that to you without a doubt. Notice what this says here. Why were these men so shamefully fearful? It was primarily because of Saul's poor leadership. Young David had a totally different spirit. Notice this. This is really critical. Quote, this is verse 26. "And David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, Well, what shall be done to the man that kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that would dare stand up to the armies of the living God? Wow. Don't hear talk like that today, because we don't have Davids around to talk that way. Not in the political spectrum anyhow. David saw these men not as the armies of Israel, but the armies of the living God. Who would dare defy the armies of the living God? David asked, not one person in that army looked at it that way, and David was just shocked. Now, in a real crisis, you see, that's where the real warriors will be coming to the surface and demonstrating their leadership. I want to look at that word reproach, because this is a key word here. David wanted to remove that reproach from Israel. And the Gesenius Hebrew and Chaldee lexicon of the Old Testament gives this definition. It's scorn, contempt, a stigma, a person or thing which is despised. That's what David wanted to remove from Israel. The absolute contempt and vile dishonor toward Israel from the Philistines, the enemy. Here is another definition from the Theological Word Book of the Old Testament, where it says the specific connotation of casting scorn on someone. That's what reproach means, their definition. Proverbs 14, verse 31, it is the antithesis of kabed, or honor, and may be understood as disgrace and dishonor. So who is it today in America or Britain or the Jewish nation in the Middle East? Who is it that would stand up and fight for the honor of a nation, or more importantly, the honor of God? And all of these nations take their genealogy right back to this time and this very history, because these are some of the modern nations of Israel. And we have proven that for many, many years. But who is it that's going to stand up and fight for honor? And today we don't even talk about something like that, it seems. That's not even important to us. But it was important to David. He was willing to die to demonstrate how important that was. That's pretty impressive, I think. And here's one more definition. An adversary reproaches with scorn or insults, taunt, pictured as treating another with contempt or scorn, mocking. The connotation defy is evident in context where one sets at naught the strength of an enemy. Now we know and we see Iran and Russia and China and other nations actually demonstrating that attitude toward America today, don't we? Don't you think we do? And I'll tell you, God has more to say about it in Malachi 1 and verse 6, where He condemns 95% of His own people, where He asks, well, why is, if I am a father, where is my honor? His own people won't stand up and fight for the Father and His family, His spiritual family. They won't do it. And God takes them to task over that. They won't fight for Him. Now, the nations of Israel won't fight for their own honor. They won't fight for the honor of the Father either. I tell you, there is a terrible a lack of faith in this land and in the nations of Israel today. And it is something we need to address, because this is a powerful warning to the nations of Israel and really the whole world today, is you're not going to accomplish anything and solve any of your problems if you don't understand what David understood and have the faith in God to solve your problems. You're not going to solve them otherwise. Well, the Bible teaches that, and the Bible is supposed to be the basis of our Christianity. Notice verse 29, where it says, David asked, well, is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? And he was looking at it, this is really profound, because he was looking at it God's way. Well, isn't there a cause? Isn't there a cause to fight for? And because he had faith in God, and the Philistines were not only dishonoring Israel, they were dishonoring God. These were the armies of the living God. And frankly, the nations of Israel today ought to be standing up for God as well, because they're the only people in this world who've had a history with God. And that can be proven so easily. We're talking really about the survival of nations. When you think about it, I mean, David just exuded faith in God. This was a warrior eager to fight for God. A teenager at this time. A teenager went out to stand up and fight Goliath when not one man in that army of Israel would do it. Now, you can call that fantasy if you want to, but let me tell you, Jesus Christ had David talked about in the New Testament as well as the Old, because it says in Acts 13 and verse 22 that David was a man after God's own heart. He wanted to be just like God in every little aspect of his life. That's why David became king and why he's going to rule over Israel forever. That's quite a prestigious responsibility when you consider even the Gentiles are going to become a part of Israel in the near future. Everybody's going to be Israel, but David was just saying, well, isn't there a cause? Isn't there a cause? Well, there was a monumental cause. Well, what was that cause? Who today will fight and see a cause in America to fight for, or Britain, or the British peoples around the world, or the Jewish nation in the Middle East? Christ talked to people when he was on this earth, and he said, well, why is it you have no faith? And when the Son of Man comes, shall he find faith? I mean, this is a question Christ is asking all of us, and we're going to have to come up with an answer sooner or later. We're going to have to answer for the way we lived. Now, Christ is going to sit on the throne of David forever. I mean, he did not consider what David did something like a legend or some kind of a bogus statement about a man which really didn't happen, but it did happen. That's why, that just shows when we don't believe that, it really reflects on our faith, doesn't it? Or lack of faith, I should say. David really believed God. Notice what he said when he was going up to Goliath to slay him. He said, the Lord has delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, and he will deliver me out of the hand of the Philistine. See, well, after all, he did do all that. Is that just impossible to believe? That the God who created man and his mind and the universe couldn't somehow work through a man to kill a lion and a bear and a giant? I mean, that's ludicrous to think that God wouldn't empower a man to do that if he wanted to. Now let me show you why he did that, why God empowered him. Notice verse 45 and 46. David spoke to Goliath, you come to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day will the Lord deliver you into my hand, and I will smite you and take your head from you, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there's a God in Israel. Well, that's what David wanted to show the whole world, that there was a God, a living God in Israel. That was his cause. That was the cause of David. Well, isn't it silly to think, or foolish to think, that God couldn't empower a man that trusted him as David did to do those things? Of course, it's different today. God's working through his spiritual church, and Israel didn't have the Holy Spirit, whereas God's church is given that today, and the work is somewhat different. But it's all still about faith, no matter on what level you're talking about here. But what an earth-shaking example that is that David set for all of mankind. He wanted to show the whole world and everybody on this earth that there is a living God in Israel. And there is a living God that rules his church today. That little remnant that did not fail to honor their father, but honored him. But do you see, I mean, honestly, if you look at this the way David did, do you see how faith can motivate us to do amazing deeds and just accomplish awesome things if we really, really believe God? David just wanted the whole world to know about the living God, that there is a living God in Israel. And who is this uncircumcised Philistines that he would dare go up against the armies of the living God? Well, who talks like that today? Well, I'm afraid we just don't have people that talk like that or really stand up for God and believe in God and have God's back and support that faith, as He always will and always does. He's made a promise and He can't lie. He couldn't lie to this teenager who just believed God. A teenager had to show all Israel how contemptible they were because they wouldn't fight for the honor of God. David was sickened by that. And he removed the dishonor from Israel. And we ought to remove the dishonor from Iran. We should have done it a long time ago if you look at it just on a human level. We should have removed it. And when we don't, it shows weakness. And oh, how that stirs up our enemies to just be contemptible to us again and again and again. That's reality. Now, if you want to know, you see, what a superpower looks like, well, David had one anciently. He had a real superpower in Israel, and he had it, and he taught it to his followers, and they believed David, and they trusted him, and God made them into a mighty nation. A mighty nation. That was about 3,000 years ago, but God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Hebrews 10 tells us. If people want to scoff, let them scoff. If they want to call the life of David a fantasy, go ahead, but he's going to rule over Israel forever under Jesus Christ, of course. But people have just trivialized this and made it look like, well, this is just a fantasy, and we ought to get our minds off of it. Verse 47. David said in the last words there in that verse, the battle is the Lord's, for He will give you into our hands. And David went over and picked up 5 stones. He didn't just take one. He knew he had to do his part, so he had 5. If he missed the first time, which he didn't, but if he missed, he had 4 more, and he was going to bring down that giant in faith. And he did. Now He's going to rule Israel. David is written about so much in the Bible. And Christ said we ought to live by every word of that. And Paul said all these examples are for those upon whom the ends of the world have come. They're for us to learn, not to scoff at, but to learn why it's true. It's just so simple for a man to do what David did if he has that kind of faith. And let me tell you, if you have it, you will astound yourself and other people about what you do if they really have an interest to look at the reality of what is going on. But there's just a gaping hole in our society today. We will not fight for the honor of God. We just simply won't do it, and people are dishonoring us, disgracing us. They're showing despicable contempt because we're so weak. That's why it is happening. You need to understand these prophecies about your people. David said in Psalm 71 and verse 5 that I trusted God from my youth. You young people, you teenagers, are you willing to trust God the way David did and do great things for God? You could. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Christ is going to sit on the throne of David forever. You see how He exalts this man? He's going to sit on David's throne forever. And notice Isaiah 9 and verse 7. For unto us a child is born, and His name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, the Mighty God, the Everlasting Father, the Prince of Peace. Of the increase of His government and peace there shall be no end upon the throne of David. It's going to be there forever. You want to belittle this man? You want to degrade him? You better be careful. He's about to rule over you and all of us. He's going to bring this world peace as He works under Jesus Christ and God the Father. And upon his kingdom to order it, our verse continues, and to establish it with judgment and with justice from henceforth, even forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. That's Isaiah 9, verses 6 and 7. And the most beautiful ending in this chapter, or this, let's say, this event, was, you can read it, and you ought to read it in 2 Samuel 21 and verse 15, where it says that, and shows how David taught his servants and all of those people to fight against the sons of Goliath. There still were giants around. And he taught these men that were under him to fight giants. They were tough people when they learned how to fight with faith and in faith for God and for David. Now this is just remarkable and wonderfully inspiring when you think about it. It says in verse 22 of that chapter, these four were born to the giant in Gath and fell by the hand of David and the hand of his servants. David and his servants were taught to fight like David and slay the giants, and we all have giants to slay in our lives. Until next week, this is Gerald Flurry. Goodbye, friends.
King David of Israel was a man of God, and he was also a man of war. God supported David and made him a mighty warrior. But the situation is different today with the descendants of ancient Israel. The United States and the English-speaking world descended from the kingdom that David ruled. Yet today's leaders of the modern nations of Israel are different than David. They are not men of God, and they're not men who will fight. The results of that leadership are now becoming clear for everyone to see. You can understand what went wrong with America's leadership, and it comes from your own history. Request our Philadelphia Trumpet reprint article, David, a King After God's Own Heart. This article will show you exactly the type of leadership that modern Israel sorely lacks. Also request Gerald Flurry's booklet, Habakkuk. Habakkuk demonstrates how we can win battles with David's faith today. Request these powerful titles today, David, a King After God's Own Heart, and Habakkuk, to order online. To see our full literature library and to watch more videos from the Key of David, visit us online at thetrumpet.com.